The distress beacon cut through the void of space like a scream in the darkness. David Reynolds felt his blood run cold as the emergency signal reached his exploration vessel. The message was simple but terrifying. They came from nowhere. God, help us all. Tau Ceti IV had been humanity's most promising mining colony. 3,000 settlers worked the rich mineral deposits on the planet's surface. The colony sent regular reports every 72 hours without fail. Now silence stretched. For 6 days, Reynolds ordered his ship toward the distant world. His crew of 43 moved with practiced efficiency as they prepared for whatever they might find. The journey took 18 hours through hyperspace. When they dropped back into normal space, the first thing they noticed was the absence of orbital traffic. The mining platforms hung empty in space. No cargo ships moved between the surface and the stations. The communication arrays broadcast nothing but static. Reynolds felt a chill that had nothing to do with the ship's temperature controls. "Take us down," he ordered his pilot, the Colonial. Settlement stretched across a wide valley between two mountain ranges. From orbit, it looked peaceful. The buildings stood intact. The landing pads showed no damage. But as they descended, the truth became clear. No lights flickered in the windows. No vehicles moved on the streets. The settlement that once bustled with activity now lay as still as a tomb. Reynolds led the away team through the colony's main gate. The massive metal barriers had been torn apart from the inside. Claw marks scored the reinforced steel. Each mark was longer than a man's arm and cut deeper than any human tool could manage. The streets told a story of chaos. Personal belongings scattered everywhere. Overturned vehicles blocked intersections. But strangest of all was what they didn't find. Bodies. Dr. Ann Foster knelt beside a set of tracks pressed into the dirt. The prints were unlike anything in human databases. Each footprint measured 2 feet long with 5 distinct claw marks. At the front, the depth suggested something incredibly heavy had made them. What kind of creature leaves tracks like these? Reynolds asked. Foster shook her head. Nothing from Earth, nothing from any world we've cataloged. They found the security center near the colony's heart. The building's reinforced walls showed the same claw damage as the gate. Inside, emergency lighting cast eerie shadows across destroyed equipment. Most of the computer systems had been smashed beyond repair. One security terminal remained functional. Foster connected her portable device and began downloading the surveillance footage. The files were corrupted, but she managed to recover fragments from the final hours before the attack. The footage showed colonists going about their daily routines. Children played in the streets. Workers headed to their shifts. Everything seemed normal until the timestamp reached 23:47 local time. Shadows moved at the edge of the recording. At first, Reynolds thought they were equipment malfunctions. Then, one shadow detached itself from the others and stepped into the light. The creature stood 8 feet tall on digitigrade legs. Its body was covered in what looked like natural armor plating. 6 arms ended in claws that gleamed like polished metal. But most disturbing was its head. The skull was elongated, with eyes that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. "Dear God," Foster whispered. The creature moved with fluid grace as it examined the colony buildings. It tilted its head, listening to something the humans couldn't hear. Then it made a sound that the recording equipment could barely capture, a low, thrumming call that seemed to vibrate through the ground itself. More shapes appeared at the edges of the footage. Dozens of the creatures emerged from concealment. They had been hiding in plain sight, their natural camouflage making them nearly invisible against the rocky terrain. What followed was not a battle, but a hunt. The creatures moved through the colony with terrifying coordination. They herded the humans like livestock, cutting off escape routes and forcing the colonists toward the central plaza. The recording quality degraded as the creature's electromagnetic fields interfered with the equipment. But Reynolds could still make out the final moments. The colonists stood huddled together in the plaza. The creatures circled them slowly, almost casually, then the recording cut to static. "They took them alive," Foster said quietly. This wasn't about destroying the colony. It was about harvesting the people. Reynolds studied the frozen final frame. One of the creatures had turned toward the camera just before the feed died. Its alien features showed something that chilled him more than the claws or the armor: intelligence. These weren't mindless beasts. They were calculating predators. The away team spent 3 more hours searching the colony. They found evidence of a systematic hunt. The creatures had disabled the communication arrays first, cutting the colonists off from help. Then they had surrounded the settlement, preventing any escape. Personal logs from the colonists told the story from inside. The attacks had started at night. Strange sounds echoed from the mountains. Tools went missing. Workers reported feeling watched. The final log entry came from Colony Administrator Beth Williams. "They're playing with us. They could have taken us all on the first night. Instead, they're letting us know they're there. They want us to be afraid." As Reynolds' team prepared to leave the dead colony, Foster made one last discovery. Hidden in a maintenance tunnel, she found scratches on the metal walls. At first, they looked random. Then she realized they formed a pattern. The marks were a primitive counting system. Someone had been keeping track of something. The final tally showed the number 2,847, almost exactly the colony's population. "They counted us," Foster said. They knew how many people lived here before they even attacked. The flight back to human space took 20 hours. Reynolds spent most of that time staring at the stars and wondering how many other worlds might be under observation. The creatures had technology advanced enough for interstellar travel. They had weapons that could tear through reinforced metal. Most importantly, they had the patience to study their prey before striking. When they reached the nearest human military base, Reynolds delivered his report to Admiral Morrison. The older woman listened without interruption as he described the attack. "How long do you think they've been watching us?" she asked. "Unknown. Could be months, could be years." Morrison nodded grimly. "And you believe there will be more attacks?" "I'm certain of it. They didn't just stumble across Tau Ceti 4. This was planned, organized. They'll hit us again." The Admiral stared at the holographic display showing human space. 17 star systems, dozens of colonies. Millions of people scattered across the galaxy. "Then we need to be ready," she said. "Because if these creatures see us as prey, they're about to learn something about humans they didn't expect." Reynolds hoped she was right. But as he looked at the footage of those alien hunters, he couldn't shake the feeling that humanity had just met something far more dangerous than anything they had ever faced. The galaxy's deadliest predators had found their newest hunting ground. The emergency session of the Colonial Defense Council convened in the underground bunkers of New Terra. Representatives from all 17 human star systems attended via hologram. The mood was tense as Admiral Morrison presented the evidence. From Tau Ceti 4, Colonel Maria Santos studied the alien footage with growing anger. She had spent 15 years defending human colonies from pirates and natural disasters. But this was different. These creatures had hunted her people like animals. "We're calling them the Ravik," Morrison announced. "Based on preliminary analysis, they appear to be a spacefaring predator species. They've been observing our colonies for an unknown period." The representative from Alpha Centauri spoke first. "What do the other galactic civilizations say about these Ravik?" "We've reached out to the Centauri Trade Union and the Vegan Collective. Both species immediately withdrew their ambassadors when we mentioned the name. They're terrified." Dr. Foster joined the briefing from her research station. "I've been analyzing the attack patterns. The Ravik hunt in coordinated packs of 12 to 20 individuals. They disable communications first, then surround their prey. They seem to prefer live capture to killing." "Why?" asked the representative from Proxima Base. "We think they enjoy the hunt itself. Based on testimonies from other species, the Ravik have been the galaxy's apex predators for over 1,000 years. They've never encountered significant resistance." Santos leaned forward. "What about their technology?" "Advanced, but not overwhelming. Their ships use conventional fusion drives. Their weapons are energy-based but not beyond our defensive capabilities. Their real advantage is biological, enhanced speed, strength, and sensory perception. The discussion continued for hours. Some representatives argued for evacuation. Others suggested diplomatic contact. But Santos had already made up her mind. "We're not running," she declared. "And we're not surrendering." Morrison nodded. "What are you proposing, Colonel?" "We fight, but not the way they expect." 3 weeks later, Santos stood in the training facility on Mars base, watching the first class of Human Defense Force volunteers. These weren't regular soldiers. They were hunters, trackers, and survival specialists from across human space. The training program was unlike anything in military history. Instead of traditional formation fighting, the recruits learned stealth, ambush tactics, and psychological warfare. They studied everything from ancient human hunting techniques to modern, asymmetric warfare. Lieutenant Owen Burke emerged as one of the program's top graduates. He had grown up on the frontier world of New Geneva, where tracking dangerous wildlife was a survival skill. Now he would use those abilities against alien predators. "The key to beating the Ravik," Santos explained to her students, "is understanding that they hunt based on predictable patterns. Every species they've encountered has reacted the same way: panic, flight, or submission. We're going to give them something different." The first test came sooner than expected. A distress signal from New Geneva reached Earth Command. The message was brief: Ravik ships detected in outer system. Colony under observation. Burke requested permission to return to his homeworld. Santos granted it, along with a handpicked team of specialists. Their mission was simple: engage the Ravik on human terms. The journey to Nuva took 8 days. Burke's team used the time to study everything known about Ravik tactics. They prepared equipment specifically designed to counter alien advantages: sound dampeners to mask their movement, thermal shields to hide their heat signatures, and electromagnetic scramblers to disrupt Ravik sensors. New Geneva was a rough world of deep forests and jagged mountains. The colonists lived in small communities scattered across the continent. Perfect hunting ground for pack predators, Burke's team arrived to find the planet's 30,000 inhabitants in a state of controlled panic. Strange contacts had been detected at the edge of the system. Alien ships shadowed the colony's orbital stations. Everyone knew what was coming. The attack began at midnight local time. Ravik dropships descended through the atmosphere toward the logging community of Pine Ridge. Burke's team was waiting. Instead of defending the town, they allowed the Ravik to land unopposed. The aliens deployed in their standard pattern: 12 hunters moving in coordinated formation toward the settlement. Burke watched through his scope as the Ravik advanced. They moved with the confidence of predators who had never faced serious resistance. That confidence was about to become their weakness. The first Ravik fell to a sniper shot from 2 kilometers away. The aliens' natural armor absorbed most of the impact, but the shot accomplished its real purpose: confusion. The pack stopped, looking for an enemy they couldn't see. Burke's team had spread out across the forest. They used the Ravik's enhanced hearing against them, creating false sounds to mask their real positions. The aliens became increasingly agitated as they tried to locate their attackers. The second phase began when Specialist Turner triggered a series of explosions along the Ravik's retreat route. The blasts weren't meant to kill, but to funnel the aliens toward a predetermined killing ground. The Ravik pack leader made a series of thrumming calls to his subordinates. Burke had studied those communication patterns. The aliens were trying to regroup using standard tactical doctrine, but human tactics didn't follow alien expectations. Instead of a frontal assault, Burke's team struck from multiple directions simultaneously. They used hit-and-run attacks, never staying in one position long enough for the Ravik to coordinate a response. The battle lasted 6 hours. When dawn broke, 8 Ravik lay dead. 3 others had been wounded and captured. The surviving pack member fled to its ship, carrying news of something unprecedented. Prey that fought back. The captured Ravik were transported to a secure facility on Earth. Dr. Foster led the interrogation team. The aliens showed no fear, only confusion. Through a universal translator, the pack's former leader spoke. "You are prey," it insisted. "Prey does not hunt." "We do," Foster replied simply. "This is not possible. We have studied your species. You are weak, slow, your weapons are primitive." "Then you studied us wrong." The Ravik's confusion was genuine. In 1,000 years of hunting, they had never encountered a prey species that adapted to their tactics. Every other race had followed predictable patterns of behavior. Meanwhile, Burke's success at New Geneva sparked a revolution in human military thinking. The tactics that had worked against one Ravik pack could be scaled up, refined, turned into doctrine. Santos established training centers on 12 worlds. Volunteers flocked to join the Human Defense Force, but these weren't soldiers in the traditional sense. They were something new, humans who could hunt the hunters. The news of the New Geneva battle spread through human space like wildfire. For the first time since the Tau Ceti IV massacre, people had hope. The Ravik could be beaten, but Foster's research revealed a troubling truth. The aliens at New Geneva had been scouts. Advanced hunters testing human defenses. The real invasion was still coming. Deep in Ravik space. The pack leader who had escaped New Geneva delivered his report to the High Council. The ancient predators listened with growing disbelief as he described prey that acted like predators. "Impossible," declared the Council's senior member. "You have been defeated by inferior beings. You bring shame to our species." "With respect? Elder, these humans are not like other prey. They think as we think, they hunt as we hunt." "Then we will send hunters who cannot be defeated. The Apex Pack will show these humans their proper place." The order went out across Ravik space. The Empire's most elite hunters would descend on human worlds. The galaxy's deadliest predators would reclaim their dominance, but in the training centers of human space, thousands of men and women prepared for the coming storm. They had learned something important at New Geneva. The Ravik could bleed. They could be surprised. They could be beaten. The galaxy's newest predators were ready to prove that humans belonged at the top of the food chain. The hunt was about to begin in earnest. The industrial world of Kepler-7 had always been a target-rich environment for raiders. Massive mining operations and isolated worker settlements made it perfect for hit-and-run attacks. But the Ravik hunting pack that entered the system expected easy prey. Not the nightmare that awaited them. Sergeant Rick Torres crouched in the abandoned factory complex, watching the alien dropship land 2 kilometers away. His Night Stalkers unit had been tracking this particular pack for 3 weeks across 2 star systems. The Ravik had no idea they were being hunted. Torres had spent 6 months developing the tactics that would change everything. Unlike traditional military units, the Night Stalkers operated on a simple principle: make the enemy afraid to hunt. They didn't seek quick victories. They sought psychological dominance. The Ravik pack deployed in their standard formation. 12 hunters spread out across the mining complex, moving toward the worker habitats with predatory confidence. They had done this countless times before on dozens of worlds. What they hadn't done was face an enemy that could wait. Torres keyed his CUM unit. "Ghost 1 to all units. Target is deployed. Begin Phase 1. The Night Stalkers had been in position for 18 hours. They knew every approach route, every hiding spot, every angle of attack. More importantly, they knew the Ravik's psychological profile. The first sign came when the pack leader found claw marks on a habitat wall, fresh gouges in the metal, but made by human tools. The message was clear: we were here. We know you're coming. The Ravik pack began to move more cautiously. Their enhanced senses detected traces of human presence everywhere. Footprints in the dust, disturbed equipment, the scent of fierce sweat lingering in the air, but the humans were gone. Always one step ahead. Always just out of reach. Torres smiled as he watched the aliens' growing confusion through his scope. The Ravik expected prey to run or hide. They didn't expect prey to leave messages. Phase 2 began when the pack reached the central processing facility. The massive complex should have been empty, but motion sensors detected movement in the depths. The Ravik moved inside, following standard hunting protocol. The facility was a maze of corridors and maintenance tunnels. Perfect terrain for ambush predators. The Ravik spread out, using their natural stealth to move through the shadows. Then, the lights went out. Emergency lighting cast eerie red shadows as the Ravik found themselves in complete darkness. Their enhanced vision adapted quickly, but something was wrong. The facility's layout had changed. Corridors that had been clear now contained barriers. Doors that had been open were now sealed. The Ravik realized they were no longer hunting. They were being herded. The first casualty came when a hunter triggered a concealed charge. The explosion didn't kill him, but it damaged his leg and sent a message. The prey had become the predator. Torres spoke into his comm system, knowing the Ravik would hear his words through their universal translators. "Welcome to our world. We've been waiting for you." The psychological effect was immediate. The Ravik pack leader made a series of distress calls. His hunters were spread throughout the facility, unable to regroup. Unknown enemies controlled the environment. Nothing was going according to plan. The Night Stalkers struck in sequence. Short, brutal engagements that left Ravik wounded but alive. Each attack came from a different direction. Each escape route led deeper into the human-controlled maze. Commander Neil Adams monitored the operation from his mobile command post. The Night Stalkers had perfected a new form of warfare, systematic psychological demolition of enemy morale. "Status report," he requested. 8 Ravik neutralized, 4 wounded. 0 human casualties, Torres replied. "The pack is breaking down. They're starting to panic." Adams nodded with satisfaction. The Ravik's greatest strength was their pack coordination. Destroy that, and individual hunters became much more vulnerable. The final phase began when the surviving Ravik tried to retreat to their ship. They found the landing pad surrounded by human forces. Not the quick strike team they expected, but a full company of Night Stalkers. The pack leader faced a choice: fight to the death or surrender. For the first time in Ravik history, a hunting party chose surrender. The captured aliens were transferred to a secure facility on Earth. Dr. Foster conducted extensive interviews with the survivors. Their responses revealed something startling. The Ravik were genuinely afraid. "We have hunted for 1,000 cycles," one prisoner explained. "Never has prey shown such cunning, such patience, such cruelty." "Cruelty?" Foster asked. "You could have killed us quickly. Instead, you chose to break our spirits, to make us feel the fear our prey once felt." Foster realized the significance of that statement. The Ravik weren't just being defeated militarily. They were being forced to experience the terror they had inflicted on others. News of the Kepler-7 operation spread through both human and Ravik space. The psychological impact was enormous. Human colonies that had lived in terror now celebrated. Ravik hunting packs that had never known fear began to hesitate, but the most significant change was happening in Ravik society itself. Young hunters, who had once volunteered eagerly for human hunts, now requested different assignments. Veterans spoke in hushed tones about the ghost hunters who seemed to appear from nowhere. The Ravik High Council convened an emergency session. Ancient predators who had ruled the galaxy for millennia found themselves facing an unprecedented crisis. Their hunters were becoming afraid to hunt. "This is temporary," declared Elder Vorth. "These humans have surprised us, but they cannot match our evolutionary superiority." "With respect, Elder," replied a younger council member, 3 hunting packs have been destroyed. 7 more have retreated without making contact. Our hunters report that humans fight like no prey species we have encountered. Then we will adapt. We will study these humans and learn their weaknesses. But adaptation was exactly what the humans had expected. Colonel Santos had anticipated the Ravik response. The Night Stalkers were already implementing Phase 2 of their strategy. Instead of waiting for Ravik attacks, human teams began seeking out alien hunting parties. They used captured Ravik technology to track ships across interstellar space. They studied alien communication patterns to predict target selections. The hunt had reversed completely. Now the Ravik found themselves being stalked by an enemy they couldn't understand. An enemy that seemed to know their every move before they made it. The breakthrough came when Torres' team infiltrated a Ravik mothership. Instead of destroying the vessel, they planted surveillance equipment throughout the ship. For the first time, humans could observe Ravik behavior in their natural environment. What they saw changed everything. The Ravik weren't just losing battles. They were losing their identity as predators. Fear was spreading through their ranks like a virus. Young Ravik questioned the wisdom of hunting humans. Veterans developed stress-related disorders. Pack leaders began making tactical errors. Born of paranoia, the galaxy's deadliest predators were learning something their victims had always known. The constant fear of being hunted was a form of psychological torture that could break any species. Adams watched the surveillance footage with growing understanding. The Ravik had ruled through fear for centuries. Now that fear was being turned against them. "How many more operations do you think we'll need?" Torres asked. "Not many," Adams replied. "They're starting to break. The question is whether they'll withdraw from human space or escalate to total war." The answer came 2 days later. Long-range sensors detected a massive Ravik fleet moving toward human space. The Alien High Council had made their decision. If fear wouldn't work, they would use overwhelming force, but the humans had learned something important from their psychological warfare campaign. The Ravik could be broken. Their legendary coordination could be shattered. Their predatory instincts could be turned against them. The final battle was coming. And for the first time in galactic history, the outcome was uncertain. The hunters had become the hunted, and the prey had become the predators. The Ravik war fleet emerged from hyperspace at the edge of human territory like a storm front of death. 200 vessels carrying the galaxy's most elite hunters descended on the frontier worlds with overwhelming force. But what they found waiting for them would shatter everything they believed about the nature of predator and prey. Marl Kate Morrison stood in the command center of Fortress Station, humanity's primary military installation. The holographic display showed the approaching alien armada in stark detail. Any conventional military force would have been crushed by such numbers, but the humans weren't planning a conventional defense. "All units, initiate Protocol 7, Morrison commanded. "Let them come to us." Across 17 star systems, human colonies seemed to empty overnight. Ships fled toward the inner worlds. Orbital platforms went dark. Even military installations appeared to shut down their defenses. The Ravik interpreted this as the behavior they expected from prey, flight in the face of superior predators. They divided their fleet into hunting groups and pursued the fleeing humans deeper into human space. They had no idea they were being led into the largest trap in galactic history. The first sign of trouble came when Ravik hunting parties began disappearing, not destroyed in battle, but simply vanishing without a trace. Their ships were found empty, drifting in space with no sign of their crews. High Commander Zerth studied the reports from his flagship. 12 hunting parties had gone missing in the past week. Each had been investigating what appeared to be easy targets: isolated mining stations, cargo convoys, research outposts. "The humans are using stealth technology," suggested his tactical officer. "Impossible. Their technology is inferior to ours. They cannot hide from our sensors," but the evidence was undeniable. Ravik hunters were being eliminated with surgical precision. Worse, the few survivors brought back reports that made no sense. "They attack from everywhere and nowhere," reported Pack Leader Vex, one of the few Ravik commanders to escape a human ambush. "One moment we are hunting an empty station. The next we are surrounded by enemies we cannot see." Zerth dismissed the report as the ravings of a failed hunter. But as more ships disappeared, a pattern emerged. The humans weren't simply hiding. They were actively hunting Ravik hunting parties. The truth was more sophisticated than Zerth could imagine. Human intelligence had mapped every Ravik communication frequency. They knew the alien fleet's composition, tactics, and target priorities before the attacks even began. More importantly, They had learned to think like Ravik. Every abandoned station contained hidden observation posts. Every empty cargo convoy was actually a disguised warship. Every research outpost was a carefully prepared killing ground. The psychological warfare campaign that had worked so well against individual packs was now being applied to an entire invasion fleet. The humans were systematically destroying Ravik. Confidence while preserving their own forces. Captain Reynolds led one of the most successful human operations. His modified cargo ship appeared to be fleeing desperately from a Ravik hunting party. The aliens pursued for 6 hours, closing the distance slowly to savor their inevitable victory. They never realized they were being led into a nebula, where 50 human warships waited in ambush. The Ravik pack was destroyed before they could send a distress signal, but the real victory wasn't the destruction of enemy ships. It was the effect on Ravik morale. Word spread through their fleet that humans were no longer running. They were luring Ravik hunters into carefully prepared traps. Dr. Foster's research team had established monitoring stations throughout the combat zone. They intercepted Ravik communications and analyzed the psychological impact of the human tactics. They're starting to question their own superiority, Foster reported to Morrison. Young hunters are requesting transfers to non-combat duties. Veterans are developing what can only be described as post-traumatic stress. How is that possible? They're the predators. Not anymore. We've reversed the relationship. Now they're the ones being hunted. The breakthrough came when human forces captured a Ravik command ship intact. The intelligence gathered from the vessel revealed the true extent of alien demoralization. Internal reports spoke of ghost ships that struck without warning. Veterans described humans who fought like demons and knew no fear. Most tellingly, the Ravik had begun developing countermeasures for human psychological warfare. They were creating new communication protocols to prevent human infiltration. They were training their hunters to recognize and resist fear, the fact that the galaxy's apex predators needed anti-fear training revealed how completely the balance of power had shifted. Morrison decided to escalate the psychological campaign. Operation Nightmare was designed to shatter Ravik morale completely. Human teams would infiltrate alien ships and create the impression that nowhere was safe. The operation began when Lieutenant Torres led a boarding party onto a Ravik cruiser. Instead of destroying the ship, they planted evidence of human presence. Throughout the vessel, claw marks that matched human tools. Messages in human languages. Most disturbing of all, they left some crew members alive to spread the story, the surviving. Ravik reported something impossible. Humans had walked through their ship undetected. They had been inside the most secure areas. They had observed the crew without being seen. The psychological impact was devastating. If humans could infiltrate their ships, nowhere was safe. The Ravik's own superior senses had been turned against them. High Commander Zurth found himself facing a crisis of command. His hunters were becoming increasingly reluctant to engage human forces. Some packs had begun refusing direct orders. The disciplined hierarchy that had made Ravik forces so effective was breaking down. "We must retreat," advised his chief tactical officer. "The humans are not behaving like any prey species we have encountered. Ravik do not retreat," Zurth replied. But privately, he was beginning to doubt their chances of victory. The final phase of the psychological campaign began when human forces started broadcasting captured Ravik distress calls. The galaxy's deadliest predators were heard pleading for help, begging for mercy, crying out in terror. The effect on Ravik morale was catastrophic. Young hunters who had grown up believing in their species' invincibility heard their heroes reduced to frightened prey. The psychological foundation of Ravik society began to crumble, but the humans weren't finished. They had learned that the Ravik's greatest weakness was their pride. A species that had ruled through fear for centuries couldn't accept being afraid. Human propagandists began broadcasting messages directly to Ravik ships. The content was simple but devastating. "We are not your prey. We are your equals. We have learned to hunt the hunters." The messages were accompanied by footage of Ravik hunters being captured, interrogated, and held prisoner. The galaxy's apex Predators were shown as frightened, confused beings who had lost their natural superiority. The psychological pressure became unbearable. Ravik crews began experiencing collective breakdowns. Ships departed the battle zone without orders. Entire hunting packs simply vanished, presumably fleeing to the safety of their home territory. Commander Zerth watched his invasion fleet disintegrate around him. The force that had entered human space with supreme confidence was now retreating. In disorder, his hunters were no longer hunting. They were running. The final humiliation came when human forces surrounded his flagship. Instead of destroying the vessel, they offered terms: surrender and live, or fight and die. For the first time in Ravik history, a high commander chose surrender. The captured aliens were treated well, but their detention had a purpose. Dr. Foster's team conducted extensive psychological evaluations. They wanted to understand exactly how the fear response had developed in a species that had never known terror. The results were remarkable. The Ravik had developed learned helplessness. Their predatory instincts were being suppressed by psychological trauma. They were becoming afraid to hunt. "We have broken them," Foster reported to Morrison. "Not just militarily, but psychologically. They will never again see humans as prey." The victory was complete, but Morrison knew it was just the beginning. Word of the Ravik defeat would spread throughout the galaxy. Other predator species would learn that humans could not be hunted safely. The balance of power had shifted permanently. The galaxy's newest apex predators were ready to claim their place at the top of the food chain. And they had done it not through superior strength or technology, but through the one thing that had always separated humans from other species: the ability to adapt, survive, and turn any situation to their advantage. The hunters had learned to fear, the prey had learned to hunt. The galaxy would never be the same. The abandoned mining facility on asteroid base Delta 7 had become the most dangerous place in the galaxy. Deep in the asteroid's tunnels, humanity's greatest military minds prepared for the final confrontation with the Ravik's most elite hunters. The outcome would determine whether humans truly belonged at the top of the galactic food chain. General Robert Hayes checked his equipment one final time as he prepared to descend into the asteroid's depths. The intelligence reports were clear. The Ravik High Council had sent their legendary Apex Pack to restore their species' reputation. These weren't ordinary hunters. They were the predators that other predators feared. The Apex Pack had never failed. In 3 centuries of existence, led by the infamous Vorth, they had brought down entire civilizations. Their arrival in human space was meant to be a demonstration of Ravik superiority. Instead, it would become their final lesson in human adaptability. Hayes' team consisted of 50 volunteers from across human space. They were the best of the best, soldiers who had proven themselves in the psychological warfare campaigns that had broken the Ravik invasion fleet. But even they understood the magnitude of the challenge ahead. The asteroid base had been chosen carefully. Its maze of mining tunnels created the perfect environment for the kind of warfare humans had mastered. No clear lines of battle, no predictable tactics. Just the raw contest between predator and prey, except now nobody was certain which was which. Major Linda Carter descended through the main access shaft, her enhanced sensors tracking movement. In the tunnels below, the Apex Pack had arrived 6 hours ago. They had moved through the facility like ghosts, but human surveillance equipment had mapped their every step. "They're good," Carter reported to Hayes. "Better than anything we've faced before, but they're still Ravik," Hayes replied. "They still think like predators. That's their weakness." The first contact came when Private Wilson detected movement in Tunnel 7, a shadow that moved too smoothly to be natural. The Apex Pack was beginning their hunt, but the humans had learned something important from their previous encounters. The Ravik hunted based on predictable patterns. Even their elite forces followed behavioral templates that could be anticipated. Carter's team allowed themselves to be detected. They retreated through the tunnels, leaving obvious signs of their passage. The Apex Pack followed, confident in their ability to corner their prey. They had no idea they were being led into a 3-dimensional chess match that had been planned months in advance. The tunnels branched in every direction, creating a maze that extended for kilometers through the asteroid's core. Hayes had spent weeks studying the layout, identifying choke points and escape routes. More importantly, he had learned to think like his enemy. The Apex Pack moved with terrifying efficiency through the facility. Unlike the regular hunters humans had faced before, these predators adapted to changing conditions. When they found prepared ambush sites, they avoided them. When they detected human scents, they circled around to attack from unexpected angles. Vorth himself was a legend among the Ravik, standing 9 feet tall with scars from 1,000 hunts. He had never lost prey that he had chosen to pursue. His reputation alone had been enough to make entire species surrender without resistance, but as he tracked the humans through the asteroid tunnels, something felt wrong. The prey was moving too confidently. They weren't panicking or making obvious mistakes. Instead, they seemed to be leading him somewhere specific. The realization came too late. As Vorth rounded a corner in pursuit of what appeared to be a fleeing human soldier, he found himself face to face with Major Carter. She stood calmly in the center of the tunnel, weapon lowered, showing no sign of fear. "Welcome to our world," she said quietly. Vorth had encountered thousands of prey species in his centuries of hunting. All of them had shown the same response when cornered: terror. But Carter's eyes held something he had never seen before in prey, confidence. The battle that followed redefined everything the galaxy thought it knew about predator and prey relationships. Vorth moved with inhuman speed, his natural armor absorbing impacts that would have killed any normal being. His claws could tear through reinforced metal, but Carter fought like something beyond his experience. She didn't try to match his strength or speed. Instead, she used his own momentum against him. She turned his advantages into weaknesses. She fought like a human. The contest moved through the tunnels as both combatants sought tactical advantage. Vorth's enhanced senses allowed him to track Carter's movements, but she used the facility's environmental systems to mask her position. When he relied on his hearing, she created false sounds. When he used his scent tracking, she employed chemical scramblers. For the first time in his existence, Vorth experienced something completely foreign: uncertainty. This prey was not behaving according to any pattern he understood. Meanwhile, the larger battle raged throughout the asteroid. Hayes coordinated his forces with surgical precision, using the same psychological tactics that had worked against the invasion fleet. But the Apex Pack was different. They adapted quickly to human strategies. The breakthrough came when Hayes realized something crucial about Ravik psychology. The Apex Pack's greatest strength was also their weakness. They had never learned to handle failure. Their entire identity was built on being the galaxy's ultimate predators. "All units implement Protocol Zero," Hayes commanded. Protocol Zero was the most dangerous gambit in human military doctrine. Instead of trying to defeat the Apex Pack, Hayes' forces would make them defeat themselves. The humans began a coordinated withdrawal, abandoning defensive positions and equipment. They left behind intelligence files that detailed human weaknesses and tactical vulnerabilities. Most importantly, they made it appear that they were fleeing in panic. The Apex Pack pursued with growing confidence. Finally, the humans were behaving like proper prey. The predators moved faster, taking greater risks as they sensed victory approaching. They failed to notice that they were being herded toward the asteroid's core, where Hayes had prepared his final surprise. The confrontation between Carter and Vorth reached its climax in the facility's central chamber. The massive space had once housed the primary mining equipment. Now it served as an arena for the ultimate test of predator versus prey. Vorth cornered Carter against the chamber's far wall. His pack was scattered throughout the facility, pursuing other humans. For the first time since entering the asteroid, he was confident of victory. "You have fought well for prey," he said through his translator, "but all hunts must end." Carter smiled, and Vorth felt a chill that had nothing to do with the asteroid's temperature. "You're right, they do." The explosion that followed had been precisely calculated. The charges didn't destroy the chamber, but they sealed every exit except one. Vorth found himself trapped with his prey in a space barely larger than a cargo container, but the real trap wasn't physical. It was psychological. For the first time in his existence, Vorth was experiencing something that every one of his victims had felt, the knowledge that escape was impossible. Carter watched as the galaxy's most feared predator began to understand his situation, trapped, cornered, at the mercy of his former prey. "Now you know how they felt," she said quietly. "Every species you hunted, every victim you cornered, this is what they experienced in their final moments." Vorth's response revealed the fundamental difference between humans and Revek, where other species had begged for mercy. He attacked with desperate fury, but desperation made him clumsy, fear made him weak. The battle ended when Carter's final shot brought down the legendary hunter. Vorth fell to his knees, mortally wounded but still alive. For the first time in 3 centuries, the galaxy's most successful predator had been defeated by his prey. "Impossible," he whispered. "Not impossible," Carter replied. "Inevitable. You made one mistake that cost you everything." "What mistake?" "You assumed that being prey made us weak. But being prey taught us to survive, to adapt, to turn any disadvantage into an advantage. That's something predators like you never learned." Throughout the asteroid, the remaining members of the Apex Pack were surrendering one by one. Hayes' psychological warfare had worked perfectly. Faced with the defeat of their leader, the galaxy's elite hunters were experiencing something unprecedented. Terror. The news of Vorth's defeat spread through Ravik space within hours. The legendary hunter who had never known failure had been brought down by creatures he had dismissed as inferior prey. The psychological impact was devastating. The Ravik High Council convened an emergency session. For the first time in their species' history, they faced a question that had never been asked. What happened when the galaxy's apex predators discovered they were no longer at the top of the food chain? "We must seek terms," declared the council's senior member. "These humans have proven they cannot be hunted safely." The formal surrender came 2 weeks later. The Ravik Empire agreed to withdraw from human space permanently. More importantly, they acknowledged humanity's status as equals in the galactic hierarchy. But the real victory extended far beyond the immediate conflict. Word of humanity's triumph spread to every corner of the galaxy. Species that had lived in terror for centuries suddenly realized that their predators could be defeated. The Zentari Collective, which had paid tribute to the Ravik for generations, declared independence. The vegan trade union expelled Ravik observers from their territory. Across the galaxy, prey species were remembering how to be predators. Admiral Morrison stood on the observation deck of her flagship, watching as the last Ravik vessels departed. Human space. The galaxy's balance of power had shifted permanently. "What happens now?" asked Colonel Santos. "Now we establish the new order," Morrison replied. "The galaxy has learned that humans cannot be hunted. But more importantly, they've learned that any species can become a predator if they're willing." To adapt, 6 months later, Hayes stood before the newly established Galactic Defense Council. Representatives from dozens of former prey species had gathered to form an alliance based on mutual protection rather than submission to predators. The Ravik Empire still existed, but it was diminished. Confined to their home systems, the once mighty predators had become just another species struggling to find their place in a galaxy that no longer feared them. And at the center of it all were the humans. Not because they were the strongest or the fastest, but because they had proven something that every prey species had forgotten. Survival wasn't about being the biggest predator. It was about being the most adaptable. The galaxy's deadliest hunters had learned fear, the prey had learned to hunt, and humanity had claimed its place as the apex predators of a new galactic order. The age of the hunt was over. The age of the hunted had begun, and the humans who had started as prey had become the predators that even predators feared to face.